It could take some seconds, so in the meanwhile, I share the link. Okay, let's check. Okay, we're live. So hello everyone to a new interview. Oh, sorry, I have to turn off myself. Okay, so hello everyone to this new interview of the series 2 weeks of databases. This time we have a great interview with Peter Zaitsev, founder of Percona and CEO of Percona. So hello, Peter.
Hey, hello everyone. And thank you, Federico. You actually pronounced my last name very well. That is a rarity. I usually go by Peter Z in Percona, right, in most US places, because everybody just butchers my last name in such a wonderful way.
Well, it's because probably Italian pronunciation is a bit more similar to Russian. And also I worked with a lot of Russians.
Oh, okay, cool.
Anyway, do you want to maybe start the interview by introducing yourself? And, well, of course, everyone knows who you are, but maybe do you want to tell us something about your background?
Yeah, of course, for sure. So, as Federico mentioned, I'm a founder and CEO of Percona, the company which started as a consulting company in MySQL space, but now we are expanded to providing variety of solutions for various open source databases such as MySQL, MongoDB, Postgres, MariaDB. And if you look at my background, I am the geek who kind of turned into CEO, but remaining a geek as well at the same time, right? You can find me speaking at a lot of technical topics at many technical conferences. I've been now running Percona for almost 14 years, so a long time. But before that, I worked at the one only original MySQL IB, the founders of MySQL, and I specialized at its MySQL performance out there.
Great. I was told something about it. Maybe you can confirm if it's true or not. That basically your role was mostly to make tests, but then if you found performance problems, you often preferred to fix them yourself.
No, not quite. Actually, I did write some MySQL code which relates to some authentication cryptographic functions, which I think by now was ripped out and replaced with implementation from OpenSSL and other libraries, right? Which is actually a good thing, right? You don't want to really have homemade cryptography in your software if you can avoid. But in reality, I didn't quite ever liked writing code because it was too slow for me, right? I mean, if you think about that, ideas move fast, right? And I like to come up with ideas and have other people implement them, right? If you will, right? So my job at MySQL was actually the multidimensional, right? So I would work with a lot of customers and partners to help them with their MySQL problems. And in many cases, you can actually do it relatively quickly because you know what? Most performance problems are stupid, right? And you know that, Federico, right? People are missing basic indexes, right? They run MySQL default settings and stuff like that. But often you'd also find some problems where changes in the MySQL code will be required, right? And then you create their different ideas in different cases and drive engineering team crazy with how much stuff you want from them.
Yeah, it's interesting. Can you tell us how is Peter Zaitsev typical workday?
Oh well, I think it's different, right? There is not quite a typical workday. I think there's maybe more of that now because we are locked at home, right? Before COVID situation, I would have like a travel days and not travel days, right? Which would be very different, right? If you are traveling to events, customers, right, and what's not, right, and when you, well, a lot depends on where you go, right, and what the schedule on the ground. If you look at my days at home, I think it's as with many people in the management, you get to have a lot of meetings, perhaps too many meetings, right, which consumes a good part of a day, and the rest is spent on a variety of activities, right? I write, I do some research, right, around both technology and in general state of business, right? There is a lot of other small things you do, right, with interacting with your colleagues, email, Slack, engage with community and so on and so forth, right? So yeah, that's how workday goes.
Okay. Okay, I want to switch more to the database topics, right? So the first question I wanted to ask is about your views on the market and on the future, maybe, of open source databases, because if I look at the news in the database world in the recent times, I see that a lot of databases moved out of the open source space, and there are, of course, a lot of cloud native databases. Some of them are exclusively cloud databases. You cannot even download them. So I wanted to ask, how do you see the future of open source databases? And also, maybe if you want to spend some words on what are the benefits of open source databases and why people should use them.
Okay. Well, I think indeed that is a very interesting topic, right? I think if you look at what happened, or what challenge the cloud brings to open source in general, is as follows, right? If you look at our approach before the cloud, we often would have the separation between your sort of hardware costs and the software, right? So think about even in the rack space days, you would rent your server in rack space, right? And either you install Oracle for it, which costs you a ton of money, or you install MySQL on it, and you can get it, pretty much for free, right? Those things would often go from a different buckets in terms of budget. Now, if you think about the modern cloud approach, and you're saying, hey, I'm spinning up something as an Amazon Aurora, right? And then, or you're spinning the, let's say, EC2 instance, then both of them kind of cost money, right? Mentally, you're just getting a different level of service, right, for database instead of compute by paying sort of a little bit more money for that, right? And that's really, I think, is problematic for open source in terms of this kind of bundling from creating the true value proposition in terms of cost, right? Because there is always infinite difference between free and then you pay something, right? But then you speak about different levels of payment, that kind of becomes in the eye of beholder. Now, I think what we also have to understand about the cloud is that the cloud is young on a historical landscape, right? And one thing I want people to remember, which most of the people of my age don't, right, is There was a time there was this kind of nasty company having a complete grip on the database marketplace. Was IBM, right? And then this was a nice startup which was democratizing databases, which was called Oracle, right? Which was out there to save people from IBM clutches. That's what Oracle was about, right? Then go over a couple of decades later, and then guess what? Oracle doesn't have customers, Oracle has hostages. Now we are saving people from Oracle by moving them to open source databases, right? And I believe a lot of the same things are looking to happen with the cloud as well, where we have been people are moving to the cloud, locking in many of those kind of very heavily proprietary cloud native, databases, right, which are escalating in costs, right, if you will. Now, what is interesting, you can see that factors already, right? There was a research done by somebody, right, where if you look at the price differentiator between, let's say, your compute costs and the premium what Amazon charges for something like Amazon Aurora, that was actually growing with every new generation, right? So the premium you are paying for those databases is increasing, and that means you can save more and more money by actually embracing open source. At the same time, I think what the open source database and in general open source approach to cloud deployment become better, right? I think this kind of rebellious against the cloud lock-in is how technologies such as Kubernetes or Terraform has been born, because as developers, we want clouds to be commodity. We don't want lock-in, right? We want to make sure we can run things, on Amazon, on Google, right, or wherever. And I think it's not seen so much in the US, but it's seen much more in the other countries, right? So, for example, if you go to China, if you go to Russia, if you go to South America, in many cases, you may not be allowed to run some applications in the places which are controlled by US companies, because as far as they're concerned, all US companies are in NSA's pockets, right? National Security Agency. And again, whether it's true or not, it doesn't matter. But what matters is what restrictions are in place, which require people to be able to run things in a variety of clouds. Now, there is also an interesting phenomenon, which I think is happening, is very interesting, is it's called the edge, right? We are also looking to deploy things, in the stores, right, or even in our home, some sort of like a smaller footprint of a system, which we do not want to be rely on the internet connection, because local internet is unreliable, and we want to make sure we have the same approach and the same system how we deploy the systems in the cloud as well as in those edge devices, right? I think all of that pushes to more open source, but it just takes a time to catch up. Okay, that is kind of a long-winded answer, but that is a topic I could talk for a long time about, right?
No, I think it was very, very interesting. Okay, something you still don't know is that I asked some people from the community privately to write down some questions for you. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions from them. But actually, before doing this, I see we have a question in the chat. It's a bit more specific, maybe. DB Demon asks, what's your take on OpenCore?
Well, what is my take on OpenCore? Well, I think that OpenCore. Well, look. First, I would say my take in general to open source software is I'm not open source software zealot, I believe what everything being equal, the open source software is the best way to go, right way to go. It gives you a lot of benefits. But at the same time, from a business standpoint, I don't think there is ever going to be a use case where all software can be developed as an open source, right? It just certain approaches does not allow the funding models for that, at least right now, right? Now, the open core is somewhere in the middle. It is better than proprietary software, right? But it is not completely open source. And I think in this case, a lot depends on how the vendor plays it, right? Now, in my opinion, for example, MySQL, which is very close to us, they are actually playing open core in a good way, right? One is MySQL Community Edition is actually good enough, right, for vast majority of users, right? It is pretty cool. Now, majority, right, or actually all the open core stuff, it comes as extensions, right? Instead of making that kind of hard, for somebody to repeat that open core, we actually make it very easy, right, with extension. And that means, for example, what Percona, we are able to re-implement a lot of the MySQL enterprise functionality and make it available in Percona Server as an open source. And not just us, like frankly, some functionality which came into Percona Server was contributed by community, right? Like people essentially on their own re-implement that enterprise functionality and include it, right? Now, if you think about the business of open source companies, open core companies, though, it's a little bit of a bait and switch, right? Because what you look in this case is you say, hey, we have this wonderful, wonderful, great community version of MySQL, right? What's not. But when you start using that, our kind of, right, if you get into the commercial relationship with that company, we will really do everything so you can start using those enterprise features. And if you have, well, guess what, right? Then you really lost by a bunch of advantage of running open source software, because you cannot really, you kind of lost the freedom, right? You have to be paying for your enterprise subscription, right? Wherever vendor is asking you.
Yeah.
Fair enough?
Sorry.
No, I'm saying that, I think that's, I hope that answers DVDman's question.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, switching to the questions I asked privately, as mentioned. You have a question from Konstantin Osipov, who, well, I will make it slightly shorter, but basically he says now Percona has experience providing support for MySQL, MariaDB, MongoDB, Postgres. So what do you think is the most healthy community and why?
I see. Oh, well, I think this is a very interesting topic, right? I mean, as we get into I think we see how much communities are different, right, in this case. And if I would see describe it kind of this way, right? If you look at the MySQL community, right, I think a lot of that is very a lot of that is very practical, right? I think a lot of the MySQL users they are not, right, like zealots around running MySQL. Many of them are running something else, right? In this case, in addition to MySQL, right, and they're fine with that. MySQL community is also kind of relatively old in a sense. That is no more kind of new kid on the block, right? That moves relatively slow, right? It's not like every month there is a ton and ton of new features coming out from a lot of places, right? Now, if you think about the MariaDB is kind of both path to the MySQL community and also kind of distinct, right, in a sense. And I think some people who love MariaDB would see themselves as a part of MySQL community, while other would see MySQL as Oracle's abomination. We just have to die, and MariaDB have to take over world. All right, there's a kind of those sort of like two subsets out there. PostgreSQL community, what I think is very interesting in this case is it doesn't have one huge vendor, right? There is, of course, Enterprise DB, which is a big one, but I don't think they, control more than, I don't know, let's say 10%, right, or something of a worldwide business around Postgres, right? And that means there is so much stuff is going on supported by those vendors. There is every freaking week when it is at least one PostgreSQL conference happening somewhere. And all those small companies in PostgreSQL space were very, very focused at the growing PostgreSQL pie first and competition between them second, right? And I think that has that for very healthy community, and I absolutely love it, right? As soon as we started doing stuff in Postgres, we actually got invitation to a lot of events, even events organized by the people who technically compete with Percona in some of our PostgreSQL offerings, right? And I think that's kind of really commitment from a lot of even kind of business leaders, right, in the PostgreSQL community at making PostgreSQL pie larger is really helping that community very, very healthy. Now, if you look at the MongoDB, I think it is interesting because if you look at the stock market price, that is their most successful company, right? In this case, they are stock price is high, and they're like really making a lot of money as you look at the stock reports, right? But it is not really the open source company, right? You can even read that from the CEO is saying, right, how they approach that. They can say, hey, well, we actually sort of freeware, right, or freemium. We kind of give some of the features of MongoDB for free to attract more people, right? They have abandoned the open source license, right, as we all know, right? In general, their approach to community has been much more restricted, right? Like, for example, contrary to PostgreSQL, they never would accept any talks from Percona at MongoDB World. Even kind of all their the meetups would pretty much tell us, oh, you know what? MongoDB sponsors this meetup, and if we accept a talk from Percona, we'll actually lose our sponsorships. We can't do that, right? And some newsletters, right? So MongoDB is all about control, which is much more typical for really commercially focused focused company, right? So again, I think that is a pretty long-winded answer, but I think to highlight here, I think is what's their help of really the community in the open source space, at least short term, may not correspond to you succeed as a business going to IPO or having a.
I'm not hearing you now.
Okay.
Okay, now I hear you. Good. I think the audio went away for some seconds.
Okay.
So, okay, I have a question from myself, which is related to this one. Did you have a chance maybe to read Andrew Hutchins' post a couple of days ago about? Okay. We also had an interview yesterday. I don't know if you also had a chance to look at it. But anyway, so basically his main point is that a wider foundation is probably needed, which should include both MySQL and MariaDB communities. What is your take about this?
What a foundation? You mean like what? Like a technical, like a foundation, like Linux Foundation, or what do you mean? I mean, I unfortunately haven't had a chance to see his interview.
Okay, no, I don't think he means a technical foundation, but more of a framework to keep the communication and the collaboration alive between different projects.
Well, I think this is interesting, right? I mean, if you look at what has been happening here is this, right? If you look at the open source, there are pretty much two approaches, right, to the open source governance. There is a foundation-driven approach, like there is. Linux Foundation or Cloud Native Foundation, right, and so on and so forth, right? There is kind of governance is not driven by the same company, right? And I think that's is right. And PostgreSQL, I think, also follows this model in the database space now, and as well as their corporation driven. Right. I mean, if you look in this case in MySQL, it is obviously MySQL. MongoDB is another, right, another use case for that. And I do not really see in this case why the MySQL would yield some of the controlling rights, right, of a project to their to a foundation, right? I mean, I don't think there is any business reasons for us to do. Now, I also think in this case, what is interesting, right? In this case, I think what MariaDB's claims in this case are not very fair if you consider the history. Right, because if you look at their MariaDB was initially born in substantial extent from based on the FUD about Oracle is surely going to kill MySQL, right? You remember that in this case. Obviously, the MySQL team and many people in the the MySQL community, right? For them, that did not get it on the right fit. And I think even continuing so, right, there is some bad mouthing which is continuous, right, in this regard, right. I think what we really need in this case, first and foremost, is much more respect between the communities and understanding of the alignment of business interests, right, and the open source, right. And sometimes I think some sort of, let's say, claims or expectations from some of the MariaDB folks about the Oracle, they're just unreal. Right. I mean, if you think about the Oracle, I believe they have been a very good steward of MySQL. In this case, they could have been much worse. But in the same case, they are Oracle, and you should not expect them to be, some non-profit, right? In this case, right? And in many cases, MySQL have to oblige to policies of that kind of super, large corporation which Oracle is.
Yeah.
So yeah, and again, I would hope for more work in this regard, but I think we should not be just blaming on Oracle. Let me give you an example, right? There was this a little thing recently about, oh my gosh, Oracle Planet MySQL filters out MySQL content. They are bad boys, right? Now, at the same time, for example, if you look at the MariaDB, MariaDB Corporation, their event like an OpenWorks, there is not even kind of acknowledgement out there what MariaDB has anything to do with MySQL, and that is where a lot of it has been originated. Right, in this case, I think MariaDB in this case, they have this kind of an interesting excuse right now, right? We can say, oh, well, we have a MariaDB Foundation, right, which is kind of, good, right? And that means MariaDB Corporation can do whatever, right? And as long as we say what MariaDB Foundation is not evil, that is good enough, right? Obviously, MySQL is not set up this way, right? It's all integrated in a single entity.
Yeah. Yeah, personally, I agree most of the things. About MySQL Planet, but also about MariaDB OpenWorks, what I think is sometimes a bit more transparency would be great. But anyway.
But again, I would say if you speak about MariaDB Corporation and Oracle, right? I think Oracle is much more open to community, right? Because I know they have been, let's say, I spoke at the Oracle Open World, right? And they have been welcoming that. I know what myself and Percona folks have been very not welcome as speakers, right? Or Percona as a sponsor at the OpenWorks event. Right, which is again very different from Oracle's. And again, I truly respect the rights of MySQL Corporation to do what's right for their business. But let's just not pretend what is not is not there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We have another question on the topic MySQL MariaDB, but it's different. It's from Gordon Bobich. He asks basically why did you choose to base Percona Server on MySQL and not MariaDB?
Well, because there is MariaDB, right? I mean, if you look in this case, our value proposition in Percona Server to a large extent is this, right? I mean, if you really want the features, the quality, right, and whatever which comes with MySQL, but at the same time, you would like to have a fully open source version which includes enterprise features, right? Then you choose Percona Server. Right?
Okay.
Now, if you speak about MariaDB Server, it's already open source. Where if you look at the features in this case, right, there is well, at least when we started, right, there have not been MariaDB Enterprise, right, and stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Good. So that has been our choice. And look, there are a number of use cases in which case I think MariaDB is a fantastic choice, right, and it's better choice than MySQL, right? But that market is already served very well by MariaDB, right, and it doesn't need yet another variant.
Okay, yeah, I see. Morgan Tucker asks you. Basically, you surely see a lot of customers choosing one database because again, Percona supports many different types of databases. So his question is if you can talk us a bit about the correct choice you see and also the incorrect choices you see, and perhaps some of them could even be some anti-patterns.
Yeah, so I think it is a very good question. My belief is when it comes to databases, there is no silver bullet, right? You cannot say, hey, you know what, this is one database and it's absolutely best for any workload, any application choice, right? In this case. Now, I think the best choice in this case is to understand the application needs, what you're going to build, and also organizational capability, right? And what I mean by that, if you have a team, right, for example, which like already in the organization, everybody knows, let's say MySQL, right? Then using the MySQL doc store, all right, for your NoSQL needs, maybe a great choice. At the same time, if you have everybody knows and loves this MongoDB, well, maybe that is where you should go, right? Because in many cases, there is also more than one way to skin the cat. What I think is a bad way to choose a database, what happens in many cases is based on the hype, right? Or based on, let's say, just developer curiosity. Like, oh, let me pick this kind of exotic database, right? Because it's written in Haskell, right? And I will have so many enjoyable evenings debugging it, right? Or like I can brag with my friends, like what I'm the only one who is using that technology, right? And maybe that is kind of I'm a little bit exaggerating that. But yeah, I think in so many cases you would see technology is picked not because of like logical reasons, right? But because of something like I am explaining. Now, I think it even gets worse, right? I mean, in Silicon Valley specifically, you see a lot of companies for years have been implementing their own databases. Like, oh, we will build our own database. Well, because actually building our own stuff is kind of more fun than trying to figure out how something else can be used, right? And then it, of course, kicks you in the ass a few years later, because when you figure out writing something is fun, maintaining something, fixing those kind of edge cases, bugs actually sucks. It's a really sucky job to do that, right? And a lot of people who you hired who love to write the new things, we don't like doing those things, right? If you look at the MySQL, I think it's interesting. You would hear like the peak was probably 5-10 years ago, right? You would have everybody would have their own fork of MySQL. LinkedIn, Twitter, Yahoo, right? Wherever, everybody has a fork of MySQL on their own, right? And that has been since consolidated, right? Only a few people do that, right? There's like, for example, still Facebook MySQL branch, but majority of people have moved to their mainline version because maintaining that through years is hard, right? And it's much smarter choice to figure out how actually use those features which exist in MySQL, right? Also.
A very, very interesting answer. I would like to ask you about an old technology and a new technology. The old technology I want to ask you about is Sphinx. Is it correct to say that you are, or at least you were, involved in it?
Oh, yes. I think that is a very interesting technology which predates Percona and also predates even modern leaders such as Elastic, right? So I mean, I was looking for some more powerful full-text search engine for a project I was doing, and that's before Percona, right? So that's a long time ago. Right, and I was introduced to a friend, to Andrei Aksionov, who actually was writing this project for his own needs, and I really encouraged him to open source it. Right, and I think there have been years, right, when if you would really need to do a full text search at scale, you would use Sphinx, right? Unfortunately, through years, where the Elastic obviously took the space of a leader, and there have been also like number of personal challenges Andrei was going through, right? Not really investing as much in Sphinx, and I think recently he sort of one of those developers who got kind of burn out, right, and give up on open source, right? Unfortunately, that happens. So the many of the new versions of Sphinx, they are you can download and free to use them, right? But they're not open source. Now, the interesting side of the story is because there have been a number of people coming to me personally and say, hey, you know what? We bet on Sphinx. It's kind of not open source anymore. What's going on? So there is another project which is called Manticore Search, which is sort of a fork of the Sphinx, right, in which maintains the open source version of that technology, and that is like very small but pretty successful and sustainable open source database company.
Great. There is only one thing that I am sorry about talking about Manticore, because one thing I appreciate a lot about Sphinx is it's basically it uses a language which is similar to SQL. It has a lot of compatibility with MySQL, very good integration, and it would be even better in this respect if it supported joins, which have been on their to-do list for several years. But if I look at what Manticore is doing, well, probably I don't think they are pushing in this direction, right?
Oh, yes, yeah. And you're right, right? Reality in this case, because when you speak about the joins, right, and things like that, that is requires you to build the essentially like a storage engine for MySQL, all right, which is very hairy undertaking, right? Like we at Percona have done a number of storage engines, and that requires a lot of time and effort to get right, and also a lot of time and effort to port with the major MySQL versions, right? Like for example, with MySQL 8, we had to rewrite a very large portion of the integration what we have for RocksDB, right, and TokuDB. And so you're right, and I think if you look also from the large scale of a developer standpoint, as we look at the market for full text search, a lot of that goes around their different use cases. Like I think actually Manticore Search does a lot of good stuff out there, right? Like for example, you don't have to massive config file. You can use like create table SQL in a SQL-like format, right? To create the data structures and then query them and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah. So I mentioned I also want to ask you about a new technology, and that is ClickHouse. So I wanted to ask you how involved you are, or maybe Percona is in ClickHouse, and what's your take on it?
Oh, yes, sure. So with ClickHouse, I think this is a very interesting technology, right? And I personally spotted that a few years ago, and for me, it has a lot of parallels with MySQL, right? Because if you think about early version of MySQL with MySum, right, no support for subqueries, right, to store procedures. MySQL sucked at a lot of things, right? If you think about that kind of a a real database and full SQL support, it sucked, right? No transactions and what's not. But there have been certain things that It was very simple, and they did very.
I think we are losing you. I can't hear you.
Okay.
Okay, I hear you again.
Yes, sorry about that. Somebody broke an internet. Usually it doesn't happen for me, but it did. Well, anyway, so what I was saying is ClickHouse is a very opinionated approach, right? And there are certain things it doesn't do, right? But there's certain things it does very well, right? Both in terms of it's very fast, it's easy to use. It actually has a lot of practical extensions of SQL, which are very convenient, right, for many use cases, right? And then as I looked at that technology, we found some partners, and we created a company called Altinity, which is focused on providing the commercial services, right, and kind of developing the enterprise-grade platform for ClickHouse, right? And that Altinity company has been doing pretty well. It was growing substantially over the last couple of years, right? Has some fantastic customers and so on. I don't run that company. Robert Hodges, who you may know from MySQL community, as a CEO of Continuant, right? He is a CEO of a company, and the company is independent from Percona through we are partners, right? We do recommend ClickHouse at Percona in the cases where it fits well.
Great. Very quick question. A bit strange maybe, but if you had to support one more database, exactly one, not two and not zero, what would that be?
Oh, well, I cannot give you that answer, right? Because we do have a short list, but we don't have a choice, right? And all of those have a different benefits and drawbacks, right? And I would say my short list of those databases would be Redis, Elastic, and Cassandra, right? These are kind of all, and the thing is, the Percona excels, I think, supporting technology which have a substantial adoption on the market, right? So we are not really focused on supporting exotic technologies, right?
I think we lost you. Yeah, we suddenly lost you.
Yes, I know. I was kind of, I think, I was finishing up at that.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I do so many meetings every day, and that never happens, right? And you jinx it, right? Or I jinx it. I know who jinxed it, but anyway, let's continue and hope it doesn't happen again.
Okay. So, if you are not in hurry, I have a last question.
Okay, no, go ahead. I think it's been scheduled for an hour, so.
Oh, great. So basically, this is a topic that we already dealt with during other interviews because it's a problem for everyone. So most of the world is in lockdown, and this is a big change in the way we work. And it's also a big change, of course, in our lives. But the thing is, there are a lot of teams that are basically used to work in person and meet physically, and some of them are struggling to work efficiently in this new way. So do you have suggestions for them?
Well, not a good one, right? I would say if you think about building a remote work culture, it takes time, right, to be really efficient, right? And many teams actually have to get like this crash course of in remote work, right now. And I think while there are certain things they are doing better and should be doing better, the team leaders should manage their expectations, and I think should not expect them to be as proficient in remote work as the teams have been doing that for years, right? And pretty much give them some slack, right, for that, some edges. I think what is very important in this case in going to the remote work is to, especially right now, is to give each other some slack, because often, we are getting interrupted with children working in, right, which they can go to school and so on and so forth, right? So that is not even a normal remote work, right? Another thing that I like advice, which is said, assume good intent, right? I think that is a very powerful approach, right? And because in remote work, a lot of kind of nuance and emotions may be lost, right? Even video chat as we have right now, it's not as powerful as if you actually see people sitting in the room with you, right? So I would recommend that. And I think also what happens for remote teams, I think investing in better in written communications, that is also very important, right? Because when we have remote work with more flexibility, naturally we'll have more asynchronous communication, right? We're not going to have spend all the time in the Zoom meetings, right? Because it is just exhausting, right? I mean, so yeah, those are a few comments from my side.
Okay, great. So since we still have some minutes, I wondered if you want to briefly tell us about some of the features that we can expect in the future from Percona software. I mean,
yes, let's do that. And also I think we can have like some live comments came in, right? I think we should maybe tackle those quickly as well. So we don't have people come unsatisfied. So if you look from the Percona work, we just released the Percona XDB Cluster 8, which I think is a very important piece for us and took a lot of work, which integrates a lot of new feature from Galera 4 with a lot of fantastic new features from MySQL 8 and Percona Server 8. It's just literally fresh off the press. Went out within the last couple of weeks. We are also focusing a lot of effort at running database on Kubernetes, right? If we build having operators for Percona XDB cluster and MongoDB, and while I think the Kubernetes is still early in the kind of life cycle when it comes to database, that is really fantastic kind of data center operating system, which really allows with probably some the simplified management interface, but really provide us some features which is similar to Amazon RDS, right? But in a fully open source environment, right? And that is something which we are very excited about. We have actually running Percona Live Online. That is a online variant of Percona Live conference, which is free to attend and take place in exactly a week. So, and we'll be doing some software announcements on that conference. So if you are interested in what Percona has been working on, I would welcome you to register and attend that event. It's free. So yeah.
Great. You mentioned high availabilities. So I have a very, very quick question. A famous quote from an old film says, there will be only one. Is this also true for Galera and Group Replication?
What do you say again? Sorry.
An old quote from Highlander film is, there will be only one.
There is only one.
Yeah, there will be. I mean, will it be true at some point also for Galera and Group Replication?
Well, I think not really, right? I think in this case, reality is what if you look at MySQL and Oracle, right? They are obviously making a bet on a MySQL group replication. At the same time, MariaDB made a bet replication, right? In this case, and in this case, I think there will be only one. May only happen when either if MySQL or MariaDB products will end, which is very unlikely. Considering there is I think there's a critical mass right now beyond both those products. Right. If you look at Percona side, we for the foreseeable future we support both technologies because they have both of them have benefits and drawbacks, right? And we just really there to provide our customers the best experience.
Great. So I close all these interviews by asking the guest to suggest a couple of books, since all of us have a lot of time to read now. So I ask you to suggest one database-related book, if you have one, and a book on any other topic you like.
Yeah. So. If you look at the database books, I will say the book which influenced me the most on my kind of really MySQL performance journey, that was actually a book by Kerry Millsap about optimizing Oracle performance. Right, which was kind of a very interested in terms of approach, Oracle's weight interface, and so on and so forth. Right, and I read that well before MySQL had performance schema and so on and so forth. But I think that is a very fantastic book still, even it's pretty old one. And if you look at the general the books. I will mention this book, which is called Halo Effect, which is really talks about the different sort of cognitive biases, right, or misrepresentation of statistics and so on and so forth. We often can get in the press, right, or around us. And this is not also like not a very recent book, but I think that is especially wonderful, valuable those days when we have huge amount of information bombards us, right, both from a classical media and from like a social media, right, in this case, where a lot of that is of a dubious quality, right? So I think they're skill to really see through at least some of the most typical ways how information can be misunderstood or misrepresented is very valuable those days.
Okay, good, interesting. So that's all for this interview, and it's been really great to have you, Peter.
Okay. Well, thank you, Federica. And sorry, some folks, I see we couldn't get to your questions during this interview, but thank you for asking them anyway.
No, I think your questions were really great, and sorry, your answers were really great. and there was good interaction, even indirect, with members who wrote me questions indirectly. I just want to remember to the viewers that 2 weeks of databases continue tomorrow until the end of the week, and tomorrow we will have Richard Heap from SQLite. So again, thank you, Peter. It's
thank you. Thank you, Federico.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.